Hey, welcome to Keeping the Vows. Today we're going to be talking about something called allegiance. I'm Mitch and I'll be your host. I've been a pastor, counselor for 30 plus years, and I've been married for 37 years. And so I'd like to bring all that experience into this talk. What is allegiance? Well, we all know when we were kids, maybe we did, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And so allegiance is where you put your first trust. Your first trust. Well, we know as Christians, our first trust goes to God. But here on earth, who does our first trust go to in the flesh? Well, it should go to our spouse and not our children, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. When I was 13 years old, something happened that just really impacted my life. My dentist was in Florida with his wife, and they were on vacation. They were walking down a sidewalk, and there was a drunk driver in a car, and the car jumped the curb and came right at him. Well, my dentist had the presence of mind to push his wife to safety, and he took the full impact of that car, and my dentist was killed. So he loved his wife so much, and his allegiance was to her, that instead of him trying to run, he pushed her out of the way, and he took the car himself. That's allegiance, okay? So how does this work out with our kids? Well, one of the things that happens is when we get married, we kind of transfer our allegiance into our children from our spouse, and that's something we want to keep from doing. Well, there's three different models of marriage I'd like to talk to you about. The first one is we'll call the ideal model. Two people meet, they become friends, they hang out together, they become more than friends, they decide to start dating, they fall in love, they decide to get married. They spend a couple years taking time to figure out who they are, work out the wrinkles in their plan and their expectations. They get their finances nailed down, they get their spiritual life nailed down, they get everything set up as well as possible, their jobs are good, and then they decide to bring children into the world. Well, when they do that, their allegiance is already formed with one another because they've done things right. The second model I'd like to talk to you about is an uncertain model. That's where two people get married maybe more on a whim, or maybe maybe they're expecting and they weren't expecting to be expecting. And so now they're going to have a baby really quickly, but they didn't have time to cement that relationship. It's so important to try to cement that relationship. So what can happen is a lot of times the mom will throw her allegiance into the kids, and the dad is the odd one out, so he just throws himself into his work. Have you ever noticed that when kids go off to college, the number of parents that break up? It's because maybe they didn't have the allegiance with each other, and their allegiance was with the kids. And once the kids were gone, the glue is no longer holding them together. It's not uncommon people come in for marriage counseling, and you need to find something that the two of them can communicate with each other about, and maybe the children are the only thing. They've closed up all the walls that the only thing they can talk about now is children, and I'll start using the children to open up and to get them to be able to talk. Okay, so there's the ideal model, there's this uncertain model, and the next one is the let's fix it model. People get married and things aren't going well after maybe 6 months or a year or two, and they say, I know how to fix this. Let's have kids, which is probably the worst thing in the world they could do. Well, our friends are having kids. It just seems like the thing to do, right? Well, children deserve to be brought into the best possible home environment. And if your marriage isn't doing well, bringing the kids into it really isn't fair to the kids, right? And it's even all the more reason why a mother's influence or a mother's allegiance, would go into that child. Okay, so when our kids were young, they always thought, like all kids, they think everything is across the board and even, and we're all the same. And so something happened in our home. We were going to make a decision, and Kim and I made a decision, and the kids said, "Well, that's not fair." And I wanted to teach them the difference between fair and allegiance. So I said, go get the dictionary. This is back in the Stone Age when they still had something called books, and they had something called dictionaries. This was long before the source of all knowledge as we've come to know it, Wikipedia. Just teasing, not serious. Okay, so they went and got a dictionary, and I said, look up the word dictator. And they looked up the word dictator, and it said, one who rules even to the point of oppression. I said, oh, yes, that's sweet. I love it. I love it. Now, open up the dictionary and look for the word peon, P-E-O-N. And a peon, it said, was a person of lowly stature with no rights. I said, oh, I love it. It's better and better yet. Yes. Okay. We do not live in a democracy in our home like the United States. We live in a dictatorship. Mom and I are the dictators, and you guys are the peons. Do you get the picture? Now, they knew that I was joking. They knew I have a great sense of humor, okay? But it also set the stage that they knew that Kim was going to have more of my allegiance than they were. Now, I explained to them about my dentist, and I told them, I said, if you and I were on the sidewalk and a car came at us, I would push you out of the way and take that car as my child. I would die for you because I love you that much. So they understood that I loved them incredibly. But because I'm a Christian, my allegiance has to go to my wife. There was a time when, years later, when Silas, our youngest, he had done something to disappoint me, and he looked at me and goes, Dad, can I ask you a question? I said, yeah. And he goes, I know that you'd said that you'd push me out of the way and you'd take the car, and I know you're mad at me now. You said that would be a reflex to do that. Would you have to think about it now, or would you know? I said, no, I wouldn't have to think about it. I could be angry at you, but I would still, the reflex would be to save your life. It was just how it would be. So it's just something that I would do. Now, God wants us to raise responsible people. And so to do that, I have to teach them that my spouse comes first, their mom comes first. And so that's what I did. Now, kids are kids. They're not adults. They shouldn't have an equal say. It's said that a lot of people don't make good adult decisions till they're age 22. I know 14, 15-year-olds that are pretty mature, and I know 70-year-olds that still don't make good life choices. But the average person, it's about age 22. So they shouldn't really have an equal vote in our house. Also, they need to grow and they need to learn how to be responsible. How do they do that? Well, we do that by modeling that for them. Children don't learn what's taught. I believe they learn what's caught. They learn what we do. So if Kim and I set up and show them that allegiance for each other is the right way to run a marriage, then hopefully they will do the same thing too. If you have a child and you put your allegiance in them and teach them they're number one, and if I have a child and do the same thing, and our two children get married, nitro meets glycerin, it's not going to be a very pretty thing. But if each of them were taught that their allegiance should go to the spouse, now they're off to a good start. So allegiance transfers to the kids, and there's a couple different ways this can happen. One is if somebody a lady has children out of wedlock, they don't transfer the allegiance to the man. There's none there, so they transfer it to their children. Another way would be a divorce. I see that happen a lot. People get divorced, and all of a sudden, then their allegiance just goes straight to their kids. Okay, and the other way is if they would be widowed. Now, when people get divorced and then they're going to get remarried and they have kids, I explain to them about allegiance. And I had one lady, and I explained to her that her allegiance needs to be tried to transfer it from your children to your husband. She said, no, I already told him the kids come first. He's second. And I thought to myself, man, why would you even get into a relationship where you know you're not going to be number one? She's married to the kids and you're just a sidekick. You're like a college roommate is all that you're going to be to her. Okay? So when you try to wean your kids in that case, they're going to come up with something that's called gas. I call it gas. When kids don't get their way, they're going to use G, guilt, A for anger, and S for silence. G-A-S, guilt, anger, silence. That's what they're going to try to do to get their way. And they will have a screaming Mimi, but you need to explain to them that, hey, I need to teach you how to have the best possible relationship. Maybe you might even feel guilt about your first relationship not going well. That's okay. We serve the God of second chances. Now's the time to show them that a marriage relationship can work out well, and now's the time to model something like this for your kids. It's something you can do. Explain to them this is the best possible thing you can do for them because you love them. And if they're old enough, even try to explain it to the kids before you get married, that there's going to be a transition taking place. I still love you. I would die for you. I would take that car for you. But the fact is, I need to teach you how to have a responsible marriage. And you know what? There's no shortcuts in this. It's so simple for us as humans to try. God says do something, and we say, oh, I know a shortcut to get the same thing. There's no shortcut for giving your spouse your allegiance. There's just nothing like it. And they deserve that allegiance. They deserve to be married to you and know that they're number one. You won't have a true one-flesh marriage without it. Hey, I'm Mitch at Keeping the Vows. I know that I can learn from you. Hopefully you can learn something from me. Feel free to comment, ask questions. I'll try to answer questions, and we'll go from there. Have a great day.